Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Solidarity in the singularity. Good evening, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and welcome to the Robservations Midnighter. This is Robservations Midnighter, episode 009. I can't believe the show is still going. Started out as an experiment. Don't know if I'm going to keep it going for the duration, but for the time being, it's kind of fun. You know, we're finding topics that I might not necessarily talk about on the daily show. And of course, this show is about you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Robservations has always been a show about something, but the Midnighter is about you. So if you have a camera and you have a microphone and you're so inclined, get it ready because soon I'm going to drop a link into the late night chat stream. And you can follow that link and come on the show. I would ask, if you have not been on the show, or if you have been on the show before, hang back, see if somebody shows up that hasn't been on the show. Because don't you want to hear from people you haven't heard from before? I know I do. But if they don't show up, by all means, jump right in. It's all one big happy fleet. Are we not? So today's article, not surprising, kind of a little boring, economics, but I read this article and I was like, wow, because there's always talk about Hollywood accounting, and any way that anybody is not going to get paid and the corporation will keep their money, they'll do it. I understand that. All you have to do is try and make an independent movie and sell it to your distributor and see how much money your distributor will make sure you get back. Unless you have something like my big fat Greek wedding, where you can't deny how much money it made. Trying to make money in Hollywood, especially as an indie filmmaker, wow, it's tough. But this article, which was in the New York Times it was in the New York Times yesterday, is pretty shocking. It's by Edmund Lee. Actually, it's today. Let's just jump right into this article and read it because, boy, oh boy, do you learn something new every day. It ain't show friends, folks. It's show business. Edmund Lee wrote this June 1st, 2021. Dismissed by critics and devoured by fans, Transformers: Age of Extinction was the top box office film in 2014, bringing in $1.1 billion, with more than three-quarters of those dollars coming from overseas. Viacom CBS's Paramount Pictures, which distributed the computer-animated action fest, saved much of that money by licensing the international rights through a complex strategy designed to avoid paying U.S. taxes, according to a study published on Tuesday by the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations, a nonprofit group funded in part by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is common practice for multinational corporations to take advantage of tax shelters. The report offers a rare look at how one company has pulled it off. Viacom CBS, a media giant that came into being after the 2019 merger of the sibling companies, has used the same strategy for all of its entertainment properties, according to the report. Since 2002, Viacom CBS and its predecessor companies, Viacom and CBS, together avoided paying $3.96 billion in U.S. corporate income tax through a system that involved subsidiaries in Barbados, the Bahamas, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Britain, according to the report. Much of the $30 billion in non-U.S. royalty revenue brought in by the company's film and TV franchises, such as Spongebob, Star Trek, and Mission Impossible, has not been subject to corporate taxes, the study determined. Viacom CBS disputed the findings, of course they did, saying that in a statement that the study was deeply flawed and misleading and that it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of U.S. tax law. It is filled with mischaracterizations, material omissions, and numerous false claims, the company said in a statement. Viacom-CBS fulfills its tax obligations in all 180-plus countries and the territories we operate, and all of our revenues, including those identified in this report, are fully taxed in relevant jurisdictions around the world, including the United States, as required by applicable law. Yes, technically, I'm sure that's probably true. Viacom-CBS added that its overall global effective tax rate was 32.6% for Viacom between 2006 and 2019, and 33.8% for CBS in that time span. The study on Viacom's tax structure has come out weeks after President Biden proposed a 15% minimum tax on overseas profits for U.S. companies, an effort designed to keep countries from competing with one another by lowering their tax rates. The suggested global rate is part of a larger plan to overhaul the tax code that would raise corporate income tax in the United States to 28% from 21%. Viacom-CBS, which is led by Sherry Redstone, has sought to take advantage of ever-changing tax laws in other countries in a cat-and-mouse game, the study said. Before the merger, Viacom and CBS, both controlled by the Redstone family, employed the same strategy of moving foreign intellectual property licensing rights to subsidiaries outside the United States when rates became more favorable, the report said. The Center for Research on Multinational Corporations said it had focused on Viacom-CBS because the company had set up a number of Dutch subsidiaries known as letterbox companies to take in large amounts of television revenue. Most of the entities did not have a single employee, Martin Heitland, one of the study's authors, said in an interview. Viacom-CBS said in its statement that it had overseas locations for core strategic business purposes and not for any perceived tax benefits. The statement added that in the Netherlands, the company has 300 employees and a production studio and generates $1 billion in annual revenue outside of licensing. Licensing, or royalty revenue, has always been a significant part of the business, accounting for about 24% of yearly sales since 2018. Media companies are now driven by streaming, a relatively new enterprise that has been losing money as it tries to attract as many subscribers possible all over the world. Unlike businesses that produce physical goods, media companies can take advantage of the intangible nature of their products. Moving licensing rights to Spongebob from one country to another is just a matter of paperwork. Jeffrey Cadet, an expert on international taxation and an instructor at the University of Washington School of Law, said the moves are akin to self-dealing. If you take money or other properties like licensing rights and move them from one subsidiary to another subsidiary, have you done anything that changes the group as a whole economically? The answer is that you haven't, he said. It's like taking a dollar bill from your front left pocket and moving it to your right rear pocket. You still have the dollar. Viacom-CBS's tax arrangements, which appear to be legal, take advantage of disparate tax codes across nations, the study said. Income that may be considered taxable in the United States may be deemed free from such levies in the Netherlands, for instance. Since 2002, tax experts working for Viacom-CBS and Viacom-CBS have devised structures to take advantage of these mismatches, thus lowering taxable income, according to the study. Almost all of these plans involved one country, the Netherlands. Dutch tax authorities, in an effort to compete with other European nations, have offered favorable rulings to multinational corporations, allowing some companies to pay taxes on just 0.8% of revenue from licensing international distribution rights. In other words, for every dollar Viacom collected overseas for a blockbuster like Transformers, after converting it from reals, lira, or renminbi, less than a penny was likely subject to corporate income tax, according to the study. Dutch authorities have created what tax experts call a conduit system, where most, if not all, U.S. companies' international income is funneled through a region with friendly tax codes. Alphabet, Starbucks, Dell, and other U.S. companies have also had units in the Netherlands. Viacom-CBS and its predecessor companies created several subsidiaries in the Netherlands to hold the foreign licensing rights to TV programs and films, largely content created in the United States. The companies then used the subsidiaries as a springboard to sub-license those rights to other markets. The money from those deals all came back to the Dutch entities, where most of it is not subject to corporate tax. One Viacom executive objected to this strategy. In 2016, she sued the company for a retaliatory firing after she spoke up about what she considered an illegal tax avoidance scheme in violation of federal law. A few months after the suit was filed, both parties settled, and the terms were not disclosed. We believe the claims to be without merit, and the matter has been resolved, the company said. In the suit, the executive accused Viacom of hatching a plan to attribute the revenues from the popular franchise Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to the Netherlands for tax advantages. While the rights to the franchise are owned by a Dutch entity, all the business concerning those rights took place in New York, the suit read. The sole purpose of transferring the licensing rights to the Netherlands company was to avoid the U.S. tax burden, the suit added. The study noted that Viacom had transferred its intellectual property rights into a subsidiary in Britain in 2015 while keeping the Dutch entities operating as a sub-branch of the British unit as a jumping-off point for selling foreign rights. The transfer, essentially a sale from one Viacom subsidiary to another, created a tax benefit, the study said. The transaction was worth $1.8 billion, according to company records cited by the study, a sum it can amortize over many years. From 2015 to 2019, Viacom's British unit collected $4.5 billion in revenue and gross profits from $1.25 billion, but the UK corporate income tax on their profits during the period was only about $18 million, according to the report. Since the amortization is considered an expense, the company was able to reduce the amount of profit it recorded. Mr. Biden's proposed tax overhaul could prevent Viacom, CBS, and other large corporations from exploiting these mismatches. Even so, U.S. companies could still move much of their business abroad, since tax rates in other countries are likely to remain low, according to Mr. Cadet. As a country, he said, we'd be better off overall with the same rate everywhere. So you're probably asking yourselves, what the hell did I just read? What does any of that mean? What is this, like the opening credits of The Phantom Menace, the opening crawl? Taxation with outlying systems is in dispute? What the hell is this? Well, I found this interesting, and I'll tell you why. I found it interesting because, whenever you make, say, a TV show, right? A TV show that airs in America, what happens with that TV show then is it's owned by the production companies that own it and the studio that made it. Like whatever studio, say, in this case, Viacom, CBS. So what happens is they sell that TV show on a country-by-country basis. It's not streaming. It's like a network show. Spongebob is syndicated or whatever. It's not on a streaming service. This is network programming. So what happens is they take their biggest shows, right? What they do is, rather than sell them directly from America to foreign markets where the money would come into America and they'd be taxed on that money, what they do is they set up a subsidiary corporation in the Netherlands, which has very favorable tax laws. And what they do is they take all the shows that are made in America and then they move them over to the Netherlands, and the Netherlands becomes the base of operations where all of these shows are sold. So what happens is, like, it's not like everybody's on a streaming service. Again, they sell, each country buys the show and pays a licensing fee. Just like when Netflix aired Friends for its last year in 2019, Netflix paid $100 million to the people that own Friends, Warner Brothers, and all the cast, and everyone gets a taste. $100 million to play Friends for a year before it went out to HBO Max. $100 million for a year. That's how lucrative these kinds of licenses can be. Well, here's the thing. What the studios are doing, because if you have multiple shows, let's say you've got 50 shows you're selling them to each different territory. So each different territory costs more money. If you want it on British TV, you have to buy it for Britain. If you want it on French TV, you have to buy it for France. And these fees are negotiable, but it's money above and beyond. So what's happening is, if you were to buy these things, I mean, if they were to license them from you and you're in America, well, then the money, when it's rolling in, you'd have to pay taxes on it. But what they do is they set up shop in the Netherlands, which has very favorable tax rates for what they're taking in. So they could, just for the sake of argument, they probably didn't sell one for this much money. But say you're in Europe, right? And you've got your Netherlands base of operations. And it is a subsidiary to CBS Viacom. So eventually the money's going to get there. But what happens is, so they sell a show for, say, let's just for the sake of argument, say $50 million. Well, whatever the tax rate is in America on a $50 million sale, you'd have to pay, let's just say, I don't know let's say 35% in taxes. So you sell it for $50 million and 35% of your sale, gone. Not insubstantial. What is that? $17 million? Goes away immediately. But in the Netherlands, what you do is the Netherlands now is selling you transfer the rights over to the Netherlands, so they're selling your shows. So maybe, you take in that same $50 million, in the Netherlands, the tax rate might only be 8%. In which case, you've saved many millions of dollars. Now imagine doing that with, 50 shows. That's a huge chunk of change that they've figured out how to make. And that's studio accounting for you. It's not illegal, but you are pocketing the cash and you don't have to pay taxes on it. It's just another way to avoid taxes. By the way, it ain't show friends, it's show business. And the reason the studios do this is because it is very, very good business. But the problem is, we ask in this country, we need tax revenue. And all these corporations, they get all kinds of tax breaks. I understand they're employing all the people, but it's still, these kinds of tax, this creative way of getting out of paying your fair share, it's tough. It's a weird situation to be in, and we have to alleviate it. It ultimately has to end, because the United States can't be, if our corporations that are making hundreds of billions of dollars are not paying their fair share of taxes, but yet, somebody on a $45,000 a year income is, how is that fair? It just goes down to, look, as much as I believe in show friends and show business and all that, we still have to do good business. If you're an American company and you're making things here and you're benefiting from American knowledge and know-how and all of our infrastructure and our police and our fire people that are paid for by your tax dollars, you need to pay your fair share. A corporation needs to pay their fair share. And I understand everybody wants to get their taxpayers more money, or their shareholders more money. I get it. But at the end of the day, with every company doing things like this, and there's all kinds of shenanigans going on. I don't begrudge them, but this is why we need people to pay their fair share of taxes, especially the entertainment business. And as a producer, I'd want to scam the taxes as much as I could to get more money to make my product. But hey, you do what you have to do, right? I guess. Norwegian Kryptonian sends in a super chat and says, Pink Floyd is to release a 5.1 version of Animals. Ooh, I'd love that. I love Animals. I used to listen to that album in high school all the time. I'd love to get a 5.1 version of that, which is amazing. George Peter Gatsis sends in a tip and says, I would love to show you and your audience my spaceship that comes with my satire parody comic book called Joe King. Well, do you have a link? I know you sent me a picture. I looked at it, but I haven't read your comic. I can't give you an endorsement unless I've read your material first. I think you said you'd send it to me. But, yeah, I thought it was cool. I saw a copy of it. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. Please do so. Send me the information, and I can put it on the show. Put it on the show. Let's see. Should I ask for anybody to come on in? I don't know. I'm going to drop this link, see who shows up. Again, maybe it'll be somebody we haven't met before. Or maybe it will be somebody we have. I don't know. I ask you to let somebody new come in. I never know what's going to happen here on Midnighter. I wanted to share that article because, I thought it's interesting that one of the problems I think this country has is there's a lot of talk of income inequality and all this. And I understand. I don't think that people or corporations that are making lots of money should be penalized for being successful. But I do think that people should be paying their way. Corporations should be paying their way because they're availing themselves of all the benefits that this country provides through taxpayer money. And it's only fair. So, Esther is now available to join the show. I'm going to add Esther. I'm going to bring Esther on. Oh, Jeremiah is here. My man Jeremiah. Jeremiah, can you hear me? It said Esther, but I'll take it. Jeremiah is here. It's good to see you, sir. Oh, hang on. Now Esther is here. Hello, Esther. Can you hear me? I can hear you. This is going to be fun. Esther and Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a new Imagination Connoisseur member, and Esther, we don't know each other, do we? But I haven't been watching you. I'm just saying. So I'm going to bring you both in the show. This is going to be fun. We have Esther coming to us. We'll find out where. We're going to give her the 6 degrees of whatever that is. I don't know. But she seems like she's a perfect guest for this show. I'm very excited to have S+. When I think Esther, I think Haman, too, if you're a biblical person. But, hey, that's something else. We won't get into that tonight. Queen. Well, oh, my God. Purim. We're going to talk some Purim. Oh, Esther and Haman. Wow, this is my kind of stream. Let me put Jeremiah in. And Jeremiah, we got Esther and Jeremiah. My God, what a group here. This is amazing. So as I put you both in the show, as I get you here, hang on. I'm very excited that Esther's here and Jeremiah's here, because apparently God is smiling on tonight's Midnighter. Please welcome Esther and Jeremiah to the show. We know Jeremiah is in Houston. Welcome. But Esther says she's been watching me since 2016, went all the way back to Collider Heroes with the great John Schnepp. Mm-hmm. So Esther, where are you from? Where are you coming from today?
I'm 2 hours from Jeremiah. I'm in Victoria, Texas.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
We got 2 Texans here.
Victoria.
I'm a Californian. I moved here for a job. But yeah.
And can you tell us what job it is, or is it secret?
No, not secret at all. I'm a professor of history.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Suddenly this show got very erudite. I love it. And we got Jeremiah. Now let me ask you, Esther, were you named after Queen Esther and Purim? You said Purim's your favorite holiday?
Yeah, it is. It is indeed. It is, for those of you out there who don't know what Purim is, the name of the game for Purim is that you have to get blindingly drunk for the entire evening. You give each other gifts, you give each other fruit baskets, and you are supposed to get very, very drunk. And if you've not read the story of Esther, it's only 5 pages in the Bible, and it's worth the read. I can't believe no one has made a big budget movie about this. There's a beauty pageant, there's a attempted genocide. It's wonderful. It's great.
It's a beautiful story.
It is. It is a good story. And now, Jeremiah, were you named? Does your name come from the Bible as well, or were you just named Jeremiah because someone's a big Robert Redford fan?
Oh yeah, no, or a Three Dog Night fan. Come on, Rob. Don't leave out Three Dog
All right,
Night.
Bullfrog. All right, Bullfrog.
Conversation.
Jeremiah, I would not presume to call you a bullfrog, but you're a good friend of mine. How about that?
Hey, I appreciate that, but we've had the chance to talk already. We've broken the ice. Let's just dive into that bullfrog talk. I'm sorry, but
bulldog, bullfrog.
Everyone else talks about being a bullfrog the first time they meet me, so I appreciate your restraint. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking Jeremiah Johnson, the movie, because
Robert Redford, of course, is legendary for that too. But yeah, my dad's a pastor, so yeah, let's have the theology discussion. Let's do it.
Wow, this is amazing. So Esther, this is amazing. Esther, you're a professor of history.
I am.
Where do you teach? What level do you teach? A collegiate level?
Yes, I'm a tenure track assistant professor of history, which means that I am on my way to tenure, hopefully in a few years. You just got to publish a lot.
Right.
And you went all the way out to Victoria for tenure. That's amazing.
The academic job market is so horrific that you have to take the job where it comes. And, 138 people applied for one job, and I was able to get it. You take the job where you can. So I teach history. I'm a medieval historian.
Wow.
I also teach classes on medievalism, which is the study of the Middle Ages as it is interpreted in popular culture.
Oh
And
wow.
so I teach film classes as well because I love medieval movies.
So like do you start every class with Anal Nathrak Uthras Betha Dothiel from Excalibur, the charm of making?
I have taught, so I had a whole week on Arthuriana, and Excalibur was. There's so many Arthur stories
Yes.
that it's hard to choose one. I choose Excalibur because
The Guy
it's
Ritchie
really
one.
like the last one that was really successful.
Yeah.
All the ones, I mean, you have to go back to my birth year, 81, to get to a successful Arthur movie. And I know that they've tried to, reboot the character, and a lot of the critiques have been like, just do an Arthur movie. Just do like a plain Arthur. Don't do an origin story. Just do an Arthur movie. Like, just give us what we want, and maybe those movies will be successful. At least that's the argument by Patrick Willems. And really, the last time that was done was, an adaptation of Thomas Mallory's King Arthur story, and it was a success in 1981. So that was the last time. And then we've had a series of successful, Arthur movies in the 50s and 60s. But
Right.
yeah, that's yeah.
No
So
love
I
for
do
Guy
like
Ritchie's?
Excalibur.
Guy Ritchie's movie is a little bit of a. How does that fit into the Arthurian pantheon? I don't know
No
about.
love for Charlie. No love for Hunnam.
Yeah, I don't know
Pass?
about.
No.
I would say this. I'm really looking forward to the Green Knight that's coming out later this
Oh,
year.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that looks pretty
Yeah.
great. Well, let me ask you
Patel,
both.
yeah, Dev Patel, crazy.
I mean, Jeremiah, coming from your father was a pastor. I find while I'm not a
From Victoria.
Your father was from Victoria.
Yes. So I'm curious how you like it because he was actually just out there a few weeks ago. So yeah,
So
how have you
look,
found it?
That's a really good question. I'm a Southern Californian. I
Oh
was.
my,
I lived
oh
in
my
Southern
goodness.
I lived in Southern California for 26 years, and I went to
Rob,
graduate school.
just so you're on the same page with us, Victoria is a very small town,
Yes.
okay.
extremely
Yes.
small, comically small even.
Well, I've been to smaller towns, and I actually interviewed in jobs which were a population 12,000. At least Victoria has 65,000 people here. But
Wow.
I grew up in Southern California, not very far from where Rob is. I grew up in the beach cities.
Okay.
And I still have a condo in Long Beach, which I rent out.
I love Long Beach, by the way.
I absolutely I lived in downtown Long Beach. It's my first love. And then I moved to New York for graduate school, and I did my PhD there. So I was a New Yorker for a bit. I did a year in London because I'm an English historian. And then I came back to New York, and I got this job in Texas. So I've only lived in coastal cities. I've lived in Long Beach. I lived in New York, and I lived in London. And now I'm on a different coast.
Wow.
So to speak. I'm on the Gulf Coast, and this is
Yep.
It's a very small town. It's a very conservative town, very different from the politics that I'm used to.
Do they celebrate Purim?
I don't even think they know what Jews are. Do
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where you would find a rabbi or a synagogue in Victoria, Texas. My goodness.
Yeah, apparently there is a synagogue, but I don't know if
Really?
if there are any Jews who go there. And I'm kind of in a weird situation because I'm Latina, so we're Sephardic. So I've always felt kind of in a liminal space in the United States. My parents are Jewish immigrants from South America, so we've never quite fit in with the Jewish Ashkenazi culture here. But at the same time, we don't fit in with Latino Catholics either.
Right.
I've always been very outside of all of this.
There's a lot of
Really?
guilt there between the Latino Catholics and the Jews, man. Can you imagine the guilt that you carry around with you? My
I-
God.
Come on, I mean,
It is a burden I bear every day, Rob. Yeah, it's so I am not a perfect Ashkenazi specimen like you are, Rob. I'm only Sephardic. Yeah, so that's my story. I don't fit. I'm not a Texan. I don't fit in Victoria at all. But people have been very welcoming here, and my colleagues.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, people are very sweet here in Texas.
Man,
with-
Well, okay, Jeremiah, your father. Is there something in the water in Victoria that it attracts godly people or scholarly people, even though it's a small town?
Yeah. It attracts godly people. It attracts movie fans. My dad's first job was actually out there in Victoria at a movie theater. He saw Star Wars. He was working at the theater when Star Wars came out. He was in high school. So yeah, it's all of it is just intertwined. His father went to Victoria for a job. They're actually from Warden, which is a little bit further north on 59. Again, another town I would not expect you to know anything about, Rob, but it is even smaller. It is one of those smaller towns that Professor Esther brought up.
Are you Professor Esther? Is that what they call you?
They call me Mrs. Cuenca, which annoys me to no end because I am not married, and being Mrs. Cuenca would mean that I would be married to my father. So I constantly have to correct the students that please do not call your female professors Mrs. because you are assuming their marital status. Call me Dr. Cuenca, call me Professor Cuenca, call me Esther, but please do not call me Mrs.
I think Professor Esther has kind of a great ring to it. I could not call you that if I was in your class.
Yeah.
I totally acceptable. As long
It
as
sounds
you
like
have-
a rap song. It could be, Professor Esther, something that LL Cool J would have sang in about 1986.
I can see that. I can see
Like
that.
Brenda's. Well, I won't.
Is it Mama knock you out?
That was a little later. This is early,
Wow. Oh my
early
goodness.
LL
Man.
Cool, early LL Cool.
Oh
You
my
know?
goodness.
I'm sorry.
Rob is trying to hip somebody to the get. I appreciate it. Look at you.
I'm dying to ask you questions. Can I ask you some questions?
You can ask me whatever you want. Both you
Okay.
can. Both of you can.
All right, dude. I gotta ask you. So you're like the physical media king, all right? And I have been trying to find a good answer to this,
Uh-oh.
and maybe I've just not been finding. My research has been lacking. How do you explain the resurgence of vinyl in the last 10 years? Where is it coming from?
Hipsters.
Why has it ensnared my soul? Why am I up late at night on Discogs getting old Temptation records? What is it about vinyl, and why did it have a comeback?
I have a theory about this. I have a theory. When everything went, well, especially music almost overnight, music used to be something tangible. So it's like when Philip Seymour Hoffman plays Lester Bangs in Almost Famous, and he talks about how music would live in your car. That you would play records, and the thing is, when you played records or you made yourself mixtapes or you had something, even CDs that you carried around and played in your car, it was something that when it's tangible, I think it means more. Like there's even when you put a tape in or a CD in, or you put the stylus down on the needle would you put the needle on the record? Put the needle on the record when the drum beats go like this. But when you do that, there's anticipation there. You're waiting, and it becomes like a ritual, and it when you're listening to it, you pay more attention even because you've had to do something in order to get this. Yeah, you're invested, and I think one of the things about file sharing is that suddenly music didn't have music was non-corporeal. It had no more body, it was gone. And then it was you make playlists and all this, and I when I was a kid growing up, when I would have my favorite records, soundtracks, music, whatever, you even knew how long the beats were between the silences of each track. Like on the record, you could count it out in your mind. You could be bump 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 bump, and then the next song would start. You knew that, and those silences were as much a part of the album as anything else, because you could anticipate the music. And when suddenly you're putting it on Spotify or whatever, or you can put it in your iTunes and you can crossfade the songs, and it suddenly became not real. I mean, even whenever you pull out an album, like I think here's another thing about vinyl. When you're looking at an album cover with a photograph on it or something, it sets the stage. It makes you think about like, why this photo? What was it about? Why is this the cover of this record? And yet it becomes a thing. So the actual cover of the record is a different artistic experience than the music, but it leads you in. It sets the tone. It's like an overture for what you're watching. And I think the reason that vinyl has had a resurgence is, one, it's big. You know, it's not this tiny thing. It has presence. When you hold it up, you're looking at this thing, and you can flip it around. If it's a double album, you can open it up, you know, and it's an experience. And so when you take it out, you already have this like preamble as it takes you in, and then going in and the mechanics of it. You know, you have to have a record player that has attached to an amplifier that's attached to speakers. And even hearing, like, this used to drive me fucking crazy. But every album I had, because I was really into vinyl for a while, and I would only get, like, Japanese vinyl was the best vinyl, UK vinyl was the second best vinyl, and then if I had to buy crappy American vinyl, I would, because it was just terrible. But when you put it down and you've got the mechanics of all of this happening, there's literally something going on where you're literally putting a thing on a thing. You know, there's hopefully you have a diamond stylus, and you're putting it on your vinyl, and there's something happening. Like there's this tangible mechanical process. That's cool too. You know, and all of those things for people. And I think what's happened is we have a whole generation of people. Like, let's say you're 30, right? And you were born in 1991. Vinyl was already out, you know, because CDs had already taken over. And CDs were cool. You know, I mean, that's fine, but they're these little silver discs. They ended up looking like just like DVDs, and you might look at a disc cover, but it was small. It didn't have any presence, and eventually CDs went away, file sharing, and you're just looking at names on a list on your computer. And I think that human beings want more from that. We want more from our art. You know, it's funny. I've been rearranging all my physical media here in my Robservatory, and I was looking at my Laserdisc collection, and I have a Laserdisc of Wagner's opera Götterdämmerung, which is part of the Ring of the Nibelung cycle. And I was looking at this. I probably haven't played this Laserdisc in 25 years. You know, but I'm looking at it, and I'm just looking at the cover. I'm like, this is fucking badass. Like, it was thick. It has multiple Laserdiscs in it. It was heavy. You know, and I'm like, I was like, should I get rid of this? I'm like, fuck no, I'm not going to get rid of this. This is Wagner, which as a Jew, I probably shouldn't like it as much as I do, but they used it in Excalibur. They used Götterdämmerung and they've used it in so many movies and all that. And I'm like, I can't get rid of this. I got to keep this. I've got an opera on Laserdisc, and it felt important. So that's my theory, that the reason vinyl is making a resurgence is because we have a whole generation of people that never had the experience of how music became important through vinyl. And you know, it's interesting. Cameron Crowe, when he on the Almost Famous Blu-ray, and it's going to be on the 4K that's coming out, he actually there's a special feature where he takes you through his 10 favorite albums of 1973. And he's got the covers, and he shows them, and he talks you through them, like Todd Rundgren, you know, and all the album-oriented rock from the 70s. And just listening to it, I'm like, this is badass. I love this. And I miss those days. I mean, I've been buying like the Prince special editions. Now, I didn't go for the vinyl because of the CDs are I know, but they still come in CD cases. Or they come in a vinyl shaped. The CDs are in a vinyl shaped box, and I love the vinyl shaped box. Yeah, no, it's look, I think I have 1,000 CDs here still. I still have 1,000 CDs, and I've got DVDs of concerts, and then I've got about 3,000 Blu-rays, and you know, I want to get down to 2,500. I want to curate my movie collection down to 2,500 movies. Like, I'm never gonna watch them until I'm dead. No. But you got to do it. You got to do it. But that's my theory.
I think
so you're a vinyl buyer. You buy vinyl.
Okay, you got to understand. So you use this example of someone born in 91. Well, I'm a what they call now a geriatric millennial. I was born in 81. So my experience, when I came of age to like start buying music, I was buying tapes. Right. And then I was buying CDs. And I kind of missed the vinyl era. Yeah. So I think you're onto something where we're kind of we fetishize or we're nostalgic for something that we never got to experience, right? But I wonder if someone like my sister, who was born in 1999, so she's a Zoomer, right? I wonder if she's going to be like me when she's 40 and will want to buy CDs. And these things with these trends with physical media will come in and out. Like for a while, tapes were kind of popular, like a few years ago, like even doing mixed tapes, like actual mixed tapes.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's just a generational thing. Like I missed out on vinyl, so that's what I'm interested in. My sister, who's 18 years younger, she'll be interested in CDs. I have no interest in going back to CDs. I lived through that era. I don't want it, but I want vinyl.
What?
Yeah, come on. What's wrong with CDs?
Nothing beats a good CD.
Well,
Oh,
first
that
of
hurts
all,
my
I get
feelings.
these big vinyls, and I love that they're different colors. I love that I get to you can kind of treat vinyl a little rough, like you can touch it. You can't
Yeah.
really touch CDs.
No, it's true.
I like that they're like big, like books that you file them, like you file them away, almost like you have like, you know, like my library. I just love their presence. I love that the pictures are big, that they're
Yeah.
just beautiful. That CDs are just, they're the same.
I agree with you. Now let me ask you, Jeremiah. You
Yeah.
know, you obviously, the room you're in, you've got, like I noticed when we first talked, that you had a book of Pauline Kael's movie reviews,
Oh,
which
yeah.
which impressed me. Now you've got
Yes,
books. You've got a lot of. I mean, I consider books physical media now too.
Yep.
Anything that's been digitized, I consider the physical, the counterpart of that physical media. So books, movies, music, and for me, what I mean, I've always loved it. Now, do you have an attachment? Obviously, you buy books. You buy a lot of books.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah,
buy
I'm a
comics,
nerd,
are you
yeah.
buying physical comic book copies? Or are you do what, read them digitally?
Rob.
I'm just asking. No judgment. Just asking.
I can't believe you would offend me and assume that I would not
No offense
buy a
intended,
physical
sir.
copy. Of course, I have to buy a physical copy. And I think to you guys' point, collecting is fun. Whatever you collect, it's just
I agree.
interesting. You know, Professor, you mentioned being on the hunt, being online. That's, you know, the chase is a part of the fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're trying to get shoes. People these days flip all kinds of nice Nikes and Adidas and limited edition collection sneakers, Louis Vuitton. It's all, collecting is just an interesting pastime. Whatever
Right.
you enjoy collecting, you know, of course, I've heard you speak many night on Hot Toys, Rob. So is that everybody's cup of tea? But it's the process of finding that thing you enjoy and then going after, you know, staying up late, driving different cities to find limited edition stuff you can't find online.
Right.
I mean, I've gone to half price books and found all kinds of crazy old in reference to your shirt. I found old Katsuhiro Tomo comics at half price books I could never find online. You know, they cost $200 online.
Right.
Half price books, they were $5. So, you know, that's part of the fun. I found Meet the Feebles on DVD.
That's, by the way, that's a really hard DVD to find.
Who you telling, man? I flipped out. I just took it and ran immediately to the front as soon as I saw it. I was like, nope, give it to me. As soon as
That's the Peter Jackson movie, right?
Yes, that's the
Yeah.
X-rated puppet movie.
Yes, one of the
That
greatest films of all time.
I have a really cool story about the physical media for that. I was hanging out at a party about 20 years ago. Was dating someone who was a film student in Southern California. And we had like one of those Secret Santa exchanges. And so everyone, since he was in a film program, the Secret Santa were all DVDs. And someone from this film program said, well, I have here a film by an Academy Award-winning director. And we got that DVD and we opened it and it was Meet the Feebles. And we had never heard of it. And we went back home and we watched it.
Oh my God.
No.
There is a scene where there is a fly that eats a bunch of shit. It's actually brilliant. I actually, as a
sodomy musical at the end.
Yeah.
it hits every kind of weird thing that I like from
It's
a
beautiful.
cult movie. I have the physical media of Meet the Feebles.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Magnificent.
that's why. I mean, I collect. It's funny. I mean, I collect physical media now, and I feel like an obligation. I used to, growing up in the 80s, exploitation, horror film, any kind of transgressive media I would want to get. And I find myself now in my middle age, I have, or even beyond, I still like, when something comes up like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Beautiful.
The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an essential movie. You have to have it because it peak verisimilitude, and there's many different versions of it. And there's all these horror films that I grew up with. I'm like, well, I have to get the best version of this. And
there's
I think
another element too that you're touching on insofar as we live in a culture where things can get canceled. What if Texas Chainsaw Massacre is deemed inappropriate? I mean, it was never allowed to be shown in Australia for a long time, right? It was banned.
So, one of my favorite movies is A Clockwork Orange.
Exactly.
And Alex the main character is a rapist murderer.
Exactly.
And I keep wondering, one day someone's going to come to my house with my entire Amazon purchase list for the last 20 years, and they're going to haul me away.
Yep.
They're going to be like, you bought, see what you know what you've bought? I'm like, yeah, I know what I bought. I just alphabetized it all. And I it's
Old Boy in the collection, Ichi the Killer. Yeah,
I do. As a matter of fact, I can't reach it. I have an Ichi the Killer action figure.
See,
right there.
Have that. Takashi Miike is problematic.
I recently recommended Clockwork Orange to someone. It's a colleague of mine who he's a professor of math. He's from Turkey, and he doesn't know like a lot of movies, like a lot of American movies, but he's seen like 2001, and he saw The Shining. So I said, you should really start to watch some of Stanley Kubrick's movies. He's has an incredible filmography. It's very diverse as far as the kinds of movies he's done, like Barry
Probably
Lyndon.
the best.
And so he watched Clockwork Orange, and I said, okay, but keep in mind, I will tell you right now, Clockwork Orange is definitely not as good as 2001, and it's maybe closer to The Shining, but it's also a very different movie genre-wise. And I'm not saying it's a good movie necessarily, but it's it's a very interesting movie. It's a very I don't know if it's good.
Then it's good. If it's interesting, it's good.
Come on, it's good.
He watched it, and he was just like I think he was very like I said, it's a very fucked up movie. You have to prepare yourself for this. And yeah, he wasn't crazy about it. He much prefers The Shining and 2001. But that's kind of like Clockwork Orange. I haven't seen it since I was a teenager.
It's more visceral.
It's a particular kind of nasty piece of cinema, which is I kind of admire it from afar, but I haven't rewatched it.
Oh, it's one of my favorite movies. What's that, Jeremiah? I didn't hear what you said.
I was just saying those other two films are cerebral. A Clockwork Orange is something you feel, kind of closer to Eyes Wide Shut.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. But yeah, I mean, what I find, like, I even go back and think about. I was having this conversation yesterday that there's a lot of movies that I grew up with, like 60s French and Italian movies, and I always talk about Antonioni's Ennui trilogy. La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse, or I think about Truffaut films like Jules and Jim, or Godard's movies. Like I was watching Masculine Feminine the other day, and I'm like, our audiences today can't cope with these movies. They're not educated to know how. They don't know how to watch them. Like they would watch these films and be like, what is this? Because it doesn't fit the paradigm of how movies are supposed to go. Like I have a favorite movie called Last Year at Marienbad. It's a very interesting movie about memory and identity and all this, and it's beautiful and I love it. And but I can't show it to anybody now. Like I can't recommend it because people are like, Rob, what is this boring, horrible? I don't even know why you asked me to watch this. And I feel like most of the movies that I grew up with when art house films or whatever, people today can't even watch them. Like they'll try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'll be bored. They won't get it because we're not trained anymore to see those kinds of films. And I had to train myself to watch these movies because when I started watching them, I'm like, I don't quite get what's going on. And then I would have to read about them. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'd go back and then I started collecting them. And and I'd go see them at revival houses so you could see them on the big screen. But nowadays, people are like, they're never going to go back to this kind of stuff. They'll never go back and watch these movies. And yet I say that, and yet there's always someone, whenever I've talked about the Ennui trilogy, somebody will write me on the show and said, Rob, I went back and I watched these movies and I found them pretty interesting.
You have to be ready. They're an acquired taste.
Can I make a bold thesis here?
Yes.
I feel that 2-hour feature film like movie watching is going the way of rock and roll music. That is to say that people who like rock and roll music, we're going to be like a very kind of niche audience. That rock and roll music is no longer popular. In fact, I have a kind of idea for an article. I write on music. I write on medievalist or fake medieval music. I've just had an article published in the journal Popular Music. And I've been thinking about this article called The Rise and Fall of Rock and Roll, 1955 to 2005.
Wow.
That rock and roll had this kind of imperial phase, right? And we're no longer in the imperial phase of rock. And and this is not to say that rock music is going to go away. It won't. There will always be a dedicated fandom for rock and roll music, just like there is for jazz. But it's no longer popular. And I feel that to a certain extent, movies are going to go that way as well. Because if you talk to young people today, they don't. You talk about like difficult art house movies that like regular Americans might struggle through. I'm talking about people who will just struggle through any kind of movie, even a movie that is very popularly kind of inclined towards a mass audience. Young people today do not really watch movies.
Right.
They don't even sometimes listen to whole songs. It's kind of like what is on TikTok. And I'm saying I'm not saying this to like bash on young people. Like trends go, and we got to kind of adapt to it. And what is cutting edge tomorrow, it just might pass us by because we're old, and I accept that. But I think movie watching and rock and roll music are kind of like somewhat in the same boat. Like there will be a dedicated fandom for rock and roll music. I will be one of them. And there will be a dedicated fandom, probably much larger than rock music, for feature films and even for art house movies. But I don't think that that's going to be the primary entertainment for people 20 years from now or even 40 years from now.
Oh, no. I completely agree with you.
I don't know.
I think interactive entertainment, we're gaming, video gaming, and virtual reality, eventually when you can be the protagonist in your own narrative, your own fictional narrative, I think that's where it's going to go. And as much as I love film is a product of the 20th century.
Yes.
Motion pictures are really a product of the 20th century. I mean, yes, I understand the technology was in the late 18th century or 19th century, but movies as an art form and as a storytelling medium really were at their best in the 20th century. And now we're living in, like, I don't know, Bret Easton Ellis used to talk about the post-empire time that we live in. But I agree with you. And I think as much as, and Jeremiah, I know you and I are huge movie lovers. And there will always be people that...
Me too. I'm a huge movie lover.
And look, rock, what I don't understand was, to me, rock and roll music was born out of, a group of people, whether it was 3 people or 4 people or 5 people, picking up instruments. Someone's a drummer, someone's a bassist, someone's a lead guitarist, someone's a vocalist, and they're making music. And I grew up in Seattle, where... we had Jimi Hendrix and we had Heart and before we had grunge rock, and now we've got Mix-a-Lot and Macklemore, not exactly the hardest rappers in the world, but
I'm sorry,
but fun.
Macklemore could fade away forever. That's fine. He could go away.
Fun rappers, I mean, I love Mix-a-Lot because he would hang out at the Dick's Drive-In, which is like the In-N-Out Burger of Seattle. He would show up there in his Lambos and just hang out. Because he was Mix-a-Lot was a man of the people, man, and
he is a national treasure. So
oh my God,
must be protected.
You go back, you listen to Swass.
I was saying this for Macklemore, by the way, not for Mix-a-Lot.
Well,
no, Macklemore could go away. Mix-a-Lot must be protected. He must be preserved.
Yes, he should be.
Rob, the heart, the rock, like the actual rock music that's made for young people. Actually, have you heard of Greta Van Fleet?
I love Greta Van Fleet.
they're little tiny Led Zeppelin babies. Okay?
Well, that's what and that's what I feel like I'm watching. Like, you know, when I watch Teen Titans Go, I love the Teen Titans. I love the comic. I love the characters. When I watch Teen Titans Go, it's like the mini-me versions of the Teen Titans. Greta Van Fleet is totally the mini-me Led Zeppelin.
But even they, I know that they got nominated for Best New Artist at the Grammys. So they have some, and I know they sell records, but they will never sell like Taylor Swift. They will never sell like or anything that's real, or Lil Nas or anything like that. And I like all those artists. I'm not putting down Beyonce or Lil Nas. I actually really like Lil Nas.
It's okay. You could. They haven't made any good music.
No. I actually like.
Recently, they have not made anything worth enjoying.
Damn it! I'm not old, but I am a. My first love is rock and roll, and I listen to Greta Van Fleet, and they're the new rock, but it's actually really old, or it's aping kind of old sound.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds. Look, when I first heard them, I just like the fact that people can play instruments and there's no auto tune. You know, and they shred, man. They're I miss, like, you know. I interviewed Dave Parker, and I interviewed on Saturday night. We had somebody on our Midnight Metal show. We had CK Smile of the Swiss band Chaosium. And they've been accused of being like a Korn ripoff, but I was like, no, there's a lot more going on there. But they're like a real band. And I started listening to them, and Dave said to me, he's like, yeah, I found this band. You know, I want to have this guy. I reached out to him, and I'm like, you're gonna get a Swiss metal singer to be on our show? I'm like, fuck yeah, dude, let's get him, bring him on. You know, and talking to him, he comes from a family of musicians. Like, he's a classically trained. It's like, look, Billie Eilish and Phineas, they are classically trained musicians from the time they were little kids. You know, and they had vocal training. They sang in the church choir. I mean, these people, brother and sister, are true producer musicians, artists. They make all their own music. They produce their own stuff. And I'm like, while, you know, when I heard Bad Guy, the single Bad Guy, I'm like, okay, this is a pop single that deserves to go to the top of the charts. This is a great pop single, and there's actually a Rolling Stone video on YouTube.
I've seen it. Yeah.
That talks about how they made that song.
Yeah,
and I'm like, fuck yeah, man. And I'm not a fan necessarily of her James Bond theme song. I'm tired of the whiny between Sam Smith and between them. Like,
no,
James Bond doesn't whine.
New James.
Bring back Aha.
The new songs.
Living Daylights.
They're still around too.
I miss New Wave. I miss New Wave.
Yes,
Give
bring
me more
back
New
Aha,
Wave.
please.
Oh,
And there are people now who are doing new wave music and kind of pretending it's actually new when it's really
Bring back
from the
Nancy
80s.
Sinatra.
oh yeah,
I love Nancy Sinatra.
yeah.
I have a 45 of Boots. So
Shit.
Wow,
An
wow.
yeah.
By the way, Harry Nice Guy sends in a super chat and says 65,000, 12,000. Laugh out loud. I grew up in a town with 4,000 residents.
Oh yeah, that's Warden. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like Edna, Texas, about half an hour.
Look at you, man. You are really just acclimating. I am proud of you. You just dove in with both feet and just started going to all these podunk towns. God bless you.
I really do not feel Texan though. I'm not. I could be here. I will probably be here for the rest of my career because
How
there are
long
no
have you been here?
jobs. I've been here since fall of 2019, and so I had 6 months of just being a normal professor, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
How much barbecue have you consumed? How many pounds?
How much barbecue?
How many pounds?
I don't eat meat. I don't.
Oh, you're a vegan or a vegetarian or a vegan in Texas?
I'm a Californian vegetarian, which means I'm a pescatarian.
All right. That's
you
good.
can barbecue your fish. Don't try to dodge my question. See, now, if you just don't want barbecue, you don't want barbecue. There's tofu, there's fish. We can still make that happen.
Okay, yeah, I'm into it, dude.
By the way, Norwegian Kryptonian says, the sound of the needle before the heartbeat, before the speak to me on dark side of the moon. Yes, what a great beginning with that TikTok sound. Yes, I'm a big fan. My man Mexican Iron Man, a great supporter of this channel and many channels, good man, sends in a super chat and says, okay, to celebrate the 700th episode, which is actually not tomorrow. It's going to be on Thursday of this show. I'm getting me some RMB Post-Geek Singularity merch. Now, if I get out of bed to get in line for this show, well, Mexican Iron Man is ready to win himself participation trophies. Laugh out loud. Hail to the Post-Geek Singularity. Well, Mexican Iron Man, let me just say, since you've come into my orbit, I have had nothing but mad respect for you, and you always put a smile on my face. But most of all, the fact that you support so many great people that do so many different channels, I really appreciate that, and it means a lot. And the fact that I feel like you've taken me in as well under your wing, so thank you very much for that. And I still want to get that hot toy with that entire like Mexican motif painted on it, whatever that would be. But we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so I think that the two of you, let me ask you this. I mean, okay, why is it that rock and roll has fallen out of favor? You know, why? Like when I heard Bad Girl talk about Billie Eilish, I'm like, that is a great pop single. And it's truly, it's artist driven. It was not, there was no some like outside producer trying to create Milli Vanilli. I mean, you know, Phineas and Billie Eilish are doing these things in their house, you know, in his home studio. And they're truly, and I think Taylor Swift, you know, what she did, because she doesn't own her own masters anymore, she just re-recorded her own album, you know, again, redoing it. I'm like, I totally respect that.
Yeah,
you know, and there's a lot of great people. There's a lot of great people coming up, but I don't see rock and roll as a force, man. When I was growing up, when you were growing up, you know, you'd have friends would be in bands, and you'd go to rock clubs, and you'd dance, and you'd hear music, and I'm like, do people do that anymore?
The medium of digestion has changed though too, Rob. You got to remember, rock was on the radio, rock was on vinyl and CDs.
Yeah.
But those things are gone. So now they have to just find ways to translate the art form to a new medium. It's not that it has to go away or that it is necessarily obsolete, but the ways it was consumed are. So
that's a wonderful insight, Jeremiah. In fact, historians of music and historians of technology track the way that music changes according to what is technologically, you know, happening as far as the production of sound and even the consumption and buying of music. So that very much influences it. Rob, you might disagree with me. What I'm gonna say here.
Well, that's okay. We don't have to agree 100%.
No, that's true. That's true. But it's an idea that I'm kind of playing around with in my head. I have been doing a lot of reading. I read on music all the time, obviously, but Tom Brahan has been writing a great series for Stereo Gum on the #1 series of essays on all the songs that hit #1 on the Billboard chart since they started tracking it in 1958.
Wow. Where is this? Where can we read this?
Stereo Gum.
Stereo Gum.
Okay.
He's a great writer on AV Club too.
First of all, I love Tom Brahan. I love his series on comic book movies on the AV Club.
He's written some great AV Club articles.
Yeah, I've got great series of articles. He writes a series of articles on action movies. He's written a series of articles called The History of Violence. So he's a great writer. But
I'm dropping this link, by the way, into the live chat to Stereo Gum if people want to check it out.
It's probably their most popular feature on Stereo Gum. And he drops something like 3 or 4 essays a week. So this guy's a machine.
Prolific.
Anyway, I've been going back, reading all of his essays, and I've read most of his essays from the 1960s. I've read most of his essays from the 1970s, and I'll say something that comes up and that I have noticed, that rock, with the exception of the Beatles, and they're a huge exception, but they're kind of almost a fluke.
Right.
Not many rock singles went to #1.
This is not to
say that rock music wasn't popular. That's not to say that rock music never went to #1, but compared to songs that were not rock and roll, pop songs just kind of dwarf rock and roll music. It was never actually that popular. It's definitely not popular now, and it was more popular when we were growing up, but it's probably more popular in our memory than it was actually by the music buying public. And an essay that really strikes me, Stephen Hayden, who's a really good music writer, he's completely shot down this theory that, Nirvana replaced Michael Jackson, that Nevermind moved Michael Jackson's Dangerous from the charts. And that never happened. We remember things because Nirvana was a very consequential band and Nevermind was a very important record. But believe me, Dangerous outsold Nevermind. It was, Michael Jackson didn't really go anywhere. It wasn't like,
Nope.
Grunge was popular a couple years and it just seems like it was more than that, but it wasn't. And a lot of it never went to number one.
It was
Smells
niche.
Like Spirit never went to number one. It went to number 6 on the Billboard chart. So I think sometimes we have this idea that rock and roll was a lot more popular than it actually was. And I'm not sure that pop music has always just been popular. So I feel like Billie Eilish is an extension of, I don't know, like the Supremes songs. Supremes was like this. The Beatles were number 1. The Supremes were number 2. The Supremes was not a rock act.
I would say that she's also in the same vein as like a Gwen Stefani, where you're kind of taking a flavor of something from outside of the mainstream and then bringing it to the mainstream in a more digestible form. Something that's a little bit more earwormy, a little bit more catchy, designed to go on the radio, go on commercials.
But I think the big difference, even with Gwen Stefani, is that Billie Eilish had the internet, and
True.
she was able to, unlike because I'm older than both of you probably combined, but when radio was radio, like when I first moved to LA, there was only one radio station I listened to, which was K-Rock. That was it.
Woo!
That was the only, Richard Blade was my jam in the morning, and the Poor Man and all that. That's all I listened to because the music that I was interested in was only on K-Rock. And that was, British pop music, new wave, and they played everything that I loved. Little tinge of goth music here and there if they played The Cult or something, or Bauhaus, even though that was Rodney on the Rock or something like that. But that was it. But there was all of my friends, everyone I knew in Los Angeles in the early 90s, we all listened to K-Rock. Nobody listened to anything else. Unless somebody was into hip-hop, they might listen to that as well. But it was all K-Rock all the time. So when Depeche Mode dropped a new single, if everybody listened, well, there you go. Okay, there you go.
Depeche Mode, sorry. Yeah.
And there was like those albums, I remember actually it came out before I moved to California. Was Black Celebration. I loved the album Black Celebration, and I had to have the import because there's a song called But Not Tonight that was not on the regular album. It's on the import version of it. I had to have that, then I have the 12-inch. I was obsessed. But everyone, so we were bonded by the fact that we were listening to all this music, and like there was an LA band that Danny Elfman's band Oingo Boingo was like the adopted LA Oingo Boingo, but Depeche Mode was our adoptive. I mean, that was the biggest K-Rock band ultimately. When they played the Rose Bowl or something, I mean, Depeche Mode, they were all over Depeche Mode. I mean, I remember when the acoustic version of Personal Jesus came out. I think I heard that 100 million times, on K-Rock, with that opening guitar riff, and it bonded us. But now with music and people listening to playlists, everything is so fragmented that there is no, maybe rap, a rap song will bond people because it bonds a community together because everyone listens to something like that, or a Taylor Swift song comes out, or a Billie Eilish song comes out, or even K-pop, I love Blackpink. People are like, you dirty old man. Well, but
K-pop is running the charts. Butter just went to number 1.
Man, when I heard Boombayah for the first time, I'm like, this shit is awesome. I love the production. And then I'm like, it's for teenage chicks from South Korea. I'm like, I'm going to jail. But I like the music.
You cannot deny the K-pop.
I mean,
my dude, you are so right. We are fractured into music communities, and this again, this is also very much having to do with the kinds of technology that are available in the distribution of music. But I mean, there still is a Billboard chart, and it's
Right.
not the perfect measure of popularity, but you are not going to see rock music on there, and you didn't see it as much as non-rock music even decades ago. So I think
But K-pop owes a debt
I do
too.
think rock is dead. I think there will always be fans. There'll be people like me who like Greta Van Fleet, even though Pitchfork gives them a 0.1.
I mean, you got to give them props just for playing well. I mean, their songs are cool. They put on. I mean, they're getting a little. Their latest single was a little glam rock for me. I was just like, "Come on, man, get back." Hey, by the way, this is so. Paul sends in a tip and says, "Guys used rock to get the girls, to be a fucking rock star. Now girls aren't just as horny for rock stars as they used to be. Couple that with learning an instrument is hard, and the chances of being canceled are pretty high nowadays." I think that's a valid point Paul is making. I mean, you know, the saying "rock out with your cock out." I mean, I know it might be a little. Now you get canceled for saying it, but
Problematic for saying that.
but it's so. But that's what it was about, because people wanted. I mean, let's face it. It was all about fucking. You know, rock was about. It was all about getting sweaty with a girl or a guy.
Isn't that what literally rock and roll means? It means fucking.
Yeah. Well, yeah, pretty much.
Doesn't what that word
pretty
means?
much.
Rock and roll. Isn't that?
No,
Well,
most
I
of
mean,
it's
you know,
fixed
you
off.
go to these parties. Like when I was a kid, well, when I was in college, you go to parties and you like I DJ'd in college, you know, and part of the appeal of even DJing was, you know, girls would come up to you and say, do you have this? Could you play this or whatever? And you're like, yeah, baby, I can play that. Let me throw that on. That was all about it. And nowadays, now it's like, oh, that's problematic. I mean, I'm not here to have your cis male patriarchy in my face. I don't want that to happen. I'm here to, and I think it's so, it's weird
Fracturing.
because
Culture fracturing.
it's bizarre. I mean, I don't understand where our culture we've lost. I thought everybody was a sensualist, and what I mean by sensualist, literally great tastes in your mouth, drinking great champagne, having great experiences with other people, you know, the erotic power of feeling someone touch you as you touch them, because you both want to be doing that kind of thing. I'm like, I look at culture now and I don't recognize it, and I'm like,
fun is problematic, Rob.
dude, I don't get it. Like, you know, when you would hear, hey, mom, I'm gonna make you like, everyone knew what that meant. You know, it's like da na 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 na, and you knew what was gonna happen next. A party was gonna happen. I mean, and then everyone had their favorite music they want. Like, for me, Prince, side 2 of 1999, which was Let's Pretend We're Married and DMSR. That was my makeout jam. That was it, man. I played those 2 songs. Everyone's like, yeah, Little Red Corvette, and I understand 1999. That's fine. But it was DMSR and Let's Pretend We're Married. I was like, that's when I fell in love with Prince. I'm like, this guy, what I love about his music, I mean, I know he changed. It was all about fucking and spirituality.
Oh,
And I'm like, this guy's, and then of course he became a Jehovah's Witness and Larry Graham and Graham Central Station, and he couldn't swear anymore, but it didn't matter.
It's
Erotic
okay.
City.
Yeah.
Come
Minneapolis, I guess. You know.
No,
That was,
Prince is
what
still-
was it
he's
about
still-
Minneapolis, man? What was it? I've been there, and I was like, what is it? What is it about Minneapolis?
I have a very random. Can we go back to film for a second? Because I have a
Yes.
very random question for you.
By the way, I got to tell the two of you, this is a fantastic conversation. You know what? I was so tired when I came on tonight. I'm like, maybe I'll just not do this show. But then people write me like, why didn't you do the show? And I'm like, okay, but this is exactly the kind of conversations I hope to have on this show. This is fantastic. Thank you both.
Well, you're speaking to an expensive brain here. There's a lot of education in there.
I love it.
A lot of money went into that brain. Actually, before I get to to one of the questions that has always been, it is. I've always wondered about this about you. But before I get to that, do you have
Uh-oh.
like these? Do you have like these sessions late at? Are you an insomniac? Like, are you, or have you always been like a late person, like I have been?
Well, here's the thing. Like when I work, I always work into the evening because no one bothers you.
Yeah.
Like during the day, and there's a lot of like when I'm editing or something, I usually work into the wee hours of the night. Like for me, I have no problem working. Like my normal work day would be to like 2 or 3. The only reason I don't work till like 3 or 4 is because I do John Campia's show in the morning. But I just like working at night because it's quiet. No one's bothering you. You get no texts. Excuse me, nothing. And so that's why I've always liked the night. Like if I could, I would stay up all night long and sleep till like, I don't know, noon or 1, and then get up. And just because I like working at night.
Rob, you sound like a rapper.
Well,
That's the LL Cool J, now the sleep schedule. Where's the
well,
mixtape?
well, I mean, it was funny. I was listening to Too Short earlier today.
Oh my goodness, you're on a roll tonight.
I and Eric B and Rakim.
Oh my goodness,
Rakim. I mean, Rakim is one of the great lyricists. I call him a lyricist. I mean, his vocal stylings, his lyrical flow. Come on, I mean, I am a big fan, and the Wu-Tang Clan too. So
Rob, you had me worried. I'll admit when you said it was Kid Cudi, it's Kid Cudi, but you just redeemed yourself, sir. You are a gentleman and a scholar.
Well, when I read things, it's usually when I read things I get it wrong. I because I'm not thinking. I'm not. I don't.
Oh, you're
think.
good. I understand.
Because I used to say, I would say when I used to say, Rakim is, I would say Rakim, which is not correct.
Tomato. We won't get on.
But it's not correct, and I, you know what YouTube has taught me to do? I got to tell you, I will say something to you both now. Don't tell anyone. I have learned about how do you pronounce this on Google. I since I started this YouTube show, because I have caught myself mispronouncing things so often, and then I'll go on to, because you can listen to things like people. Jason Webster will write me letters and review Japanese movies and give me like 25 Japanese names to say. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, I can't. I'm massacring these names, but I love his reviews. And so I go to how do you pronounce this a lot, and then usually sometimes I have to listen to 2 or 3 pronunciations because I'll get different ones.
Yeah. It's hard. I'm just teasing. I'm from Texas. We mispronounce everything.
No, but you're right. Kid Cudi. This is a problem, and for me, like when I was saying, like, and I love Eric being, it's Rakim, not Rakim. And I would say Rakim, and that's like not correct. And, I would say it, and you know how when you read a book and you read the names in books and you've never heard them said out loud before? And you, in your own mind, you just say
Mark
them.
Miller or Mark Millar.
Millar, yeah. You just say them how you read, like in fiction, especially when you're reading fantasy or science fiction, which I read a lot of. There are names and you're like, that's gobbledygook. I'm just going to, in my mind, I'm giving it a thing.
Yes,
now
I'm
you know what it
Dune
is
right now, and that's exactly what's happening.
And then when they make a TV show,
I find that admirable, Rob. I think that's admirable. I also make sure. Listen, I lecture in history, so I want to make sure that I get place names and people's names correct. So I do the same thing as you. Listen. As soon as the semester ended, I teach morning classes. As soon as the semester ended, which it did 2 weeks ago, my schedule completely shifted. I go to bed at 6 a.m. and wake up at 1.
Wow.
And so that's just maybe how I naturally am. I don't know. So I'm glad you have this show. But I have a question. So let me get to my question.
Yes.
I've been watching you for a few years, and it seems that whenever I'm not going to say anything bad. Come on.
Okay. Scared.
It seems that whenever you mention you use it when you're talking to John, and you use an example of a film that obviously you like, but it's a film that is that has gravitas, or that's Oscar caliber. You always use the film The English Patient, And I'll tell you, you always use that as like that's your prime example. And I'll tell you why that's so interesting to me. Okay, because there were, I grew up in the 90s. I'm born in 81, so I grew up like my music taste, my film taste is in the stew of the 90s.
The best movie decade.
Come on. Come on.
The 90s is
I'm very partial to the 70s, but okay.
99 by itself is amazing.
Well, 99 is an amazing year. It is. I'll grant you that.
98 is an amazing year as well.
The Fugitive.
So, yeah, I saw The Fugitive in the theater. I was 13. That came out in 94.
I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. I love that.
Great delivery. But so when I was getting into film, and I've always loved movies, probably more so than music. I got into movies for there's always those few films that really make you appreciate the medium. For me, those films were Pulp Fiction, 94, and The English Patient, 1996, I believe. Both Weinstein productions, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was 15 years old or so. I was 15 or 16 years old when The English Patient came out. And my parents are not necessarily huge movie aficionados. And I had them drive me down to the Pacific Theaters in Manhattan Beach so that I could watch The English Patient, because The English Patient that was the closest place that it was playing. It was 25 minutes away from the house. And so we arranged it. So I went to the theater alone to watch The English Patient because I really had wanted to see. I had this huge crush on Ralph Fiennes, and I still kind of do.
By the way, he's never been a peak Ralph Fiennes in The English Patient. Peak Ralph Fiennes.
Okay, first of all, that tan, the piercing blue eyes.
Come on.
Come on. That guy's a god.
Yes.
Best actor.
And you don't need Chris Hemsworth muscles if you look like Ralph Fiennes. All right.
You got the voice too. You still got it.
I saw The English Patient, and I was completely transfixed, and it was so bizarre to me that there was a huge, at the time, there was a backlash against it. There was that Seinfeld episode that made fun of the English Patient. And then there was a huge kind of, I wouldn't say a critical backlash, but rather when it kind of semi-swept the Oscars, or like, well, Fargo should have gotten. Well, I've also watched Fargo, the Coen Brothers movie, and it was, I liked it, but it was not like The English Patient for me. So I was in the minority, in the critical minority with that.
No.
And that movie still sticks with me. I bought it on Laserdisc for $70 when it came out in 98 or so, because we had a Laserdisc player. And of course I had a DVD, I have the special DVDs. And that movie, I don't know if you've tried to read the Michael Ondaatje novel.
I have.
But the fact that Anthony Minghella wrote such a beautiful literary screenplay that captures the movie but still makes it cinematic, that whole movie is just so gorgeous. I'm actually a huge fan of Anthony Minghella. I actually think Breaking and Entering, this movie that he did with Jude Law, is fantastic. I think it was his last film before he died. And that movie, it gets a lot of shit, but you're the only internet critic that I've seen who takes it seriously. And I know that you use it as an example of what a good movie is.
Oh my God. Okay. I love The English Patient. I just don't just like it. And there were two movies in my life that I saw in the theater. The first was actually Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood movie. I saw it at 92. I think it came out in the summer of, was it summer of 92? The Academy Awards are 93. But when I saw it in the Chinese theater, and when it was over, I turned to my friend Wayne, who I was with watching it. I turned to him and I said, bruh, I didn't say bruh, I probably said dude. I was like, dude, this movie is going to win Best Picture. And he looked at me and he's like, I think you might be right. I go, I've never seen a movie that deconstructed a genre the way that I was so enamored of this film. Mm-hmm. And in when I saw, was it 96 or was it later? But when I saw
it came out in 96.
Okay.
Yeah, towards the end of the year. Yeah.
I saw The English Patient at the Hollywood Galaxy. No, at the it was at the Beverly Connection, which no longer exists. And it was the same thing. When I saw English Patient, I was so blown away by this movie. and all of it. I don't remember who I was seeing it with, but when it was over, I'm like, this movie is going to win Best Picture.
I said the same thing. Yeah.
No contest. I haven't. And what I find so interesting about The English Patient is, I love Ralph Fiennes. I love Kristen Scott Thomas. I love all of the characters and the milieu and the idea of these rich dudes who own planes and they're mapping Africa. Like, that's what they do for. Everything about, and the music. My God, is the score
Gabriel
for
Yared.
Oh
Gabriel
my
Yared.
God! And Gabriel Yared had done the score for Betty Blue, that Jean-Jacques Bonnet had made after he made Diva, and I love Betty Blue. I love that score, and I loved The English Patient, and everyone they didn't just dislike it. There was active hate. Like, people really didn't. And I'm like,
Not like from Ebert. Siskel and Ebert, like, those critics are like, no, what are you talking about? This movie is great. Like, shut up. So you did, but and the LA Times critic, Kenneth
Thomas.
Yeah, he was into it, and so was Peter Travers, and so you did have some critics.
And it won Best Picture. I mean. And I totally identified with Ralph Fiennes. I totally identified with Juliette Binoche and Naveen Andrews from Lost, which I saw him in English Patient before that. And there was nothing about The English Patient that I didn't love. And I've read some really scathing articles where people hated it. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, how do you? I find it so lyrical and so beautifully done, and it's a movie that is clearly to me it harked back to those movies I love from the '60s.
Yeah. It's David Lean. It's a David Lean.
Yeah. Yep.
But it also, I love the illicit romance of it. Mm-hmm. That you've got kind of this misanthrope that somehow is able to get Kristen Scott Thomas to fall in love with him, and they have this very passionate, very sexual, wanton. That's something I really miss. I think our culture needs a little bit more wanton sexuality in it.
No,
everybody's talking about their sexuality and about their rights and who they want to be and all this. And I'm like, yeah, but no one's fucking. Our birth rates are falling, and I'm like, come on, man. Where's the eroticism in our culture?
No.
And that drove our art. That drove rock and roll. I think that's why rock and roll has fallen from favor. Because kids are going to college now and they want to, protest. Well, you're a professor. I don't know if this is the case, but I did go to the Evergreen State College before I went to USC, and Evergreen had this student uprising, and I'm like, when I was at Evergreen in 1985, the biggest organizations on campus were the Lesbian Gay Student Coalition, and they threw the best parties. Whether you were gay or straight, it didn't matter. There was a lot of fucking happening at those parties, and it was great, and it was awesome, and everyone's like, all hail the Lesbian Gay Student Coalition at Evergreen. It was amazing, and everybody turned out for it, and there was nobody accusing anybody of any kind of sexism, racism. No isms were happening on campus. And I'm like, what happened to that? Where did that go? Like where? And you're in academia, so what's going on with our kids today, man? Like, why? Where's the fun? Why is everybody an activist?
Everything.
Well, first of all, I'm at an HSI. There are 400 or so federally designated HSI institutions in the U.S. That's a Hispanic serving institution. It means that minimum 25% of our population is Hispanic. So 43% of the students that go to my institution are Hispanic. I think that the kind of activism that you're talking about, for me, at least, the way that I see it is it happens in a lot of like richer institutions. Like, my students are working class. They're Hispanic, they're working class. They kind of skew more conservative than not. Right. And it's not and it's not that we don't have our gay and lesbian
Communities.
communities, or we don't have our film clubs, but our students are working very hard, and it's a miracle just to get them in class,
Right.
and to show up, which is why a lot of our classes have to be done. Even before COVID, a lot of them were done online, because our students tend to be older, they tend to be married, and they tend to have full-time jobs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's really where the student population is going. The student population in America is increasingly getting less white, and they're getting older, because people are juggling careers and jobs with trying to get a university degree. I find activism by young people very inspiring, and I think that we tend to. I'm a historian, so I tend to look at long-term trends, and it's always the people looking forward to the new generation. They're like, well, why isn't that they're doing it the way that we did? And then that generation will look, well, why aren't they doing it the way that we're doing it?
Right.
And so on and so on and so forth. And I think that I as a historian, I tend to take the long view towards these things, and try to understand where these individuals are coming from, and what exactly they're protesting. They're not in an economy that our parents enjoyed.
No,
growing up.
Certainly not.
They're in a much more precarious position. Even people my age and younger, and I would even say Generation X people as well. I'm kind of on the cusp. So it's a very different time, and I try to as a historian, I try to understand particular circumstances, and I try to understand people's histories from their point of view, because I think that's what makes us good historians.
But I don't think activism is even centered around economics anymore. It seems like it's all around identity politics at the cost of having those real substantive economic conversations.
That's a good point, but I don't think that there's anything wrong. I mean, everyone engages in identity politics. Even economic activism is identity politics to a certain degree. If you have, for example, conservative activists who want to have no taxes, or want to have corporate tax cuts, that in a way is identity politics for
I
them.
agree.
It's money for their class interests. That
But that's
is
not,
a class's identity as well.
those aren't the kind of protests we've been getting. I think we should have those kinds of protests. And if those are the kind of identity politics we end up engaging in, I think that's productive. But I think we end up taking one way too far, and we never engage in those economic conversations. We have Black Lives Matter rallies about, George Floyd or hands up, don't shoot, but we never talk about reparations. We never talk about making sure that we confront redlining. We never talk about the history of economic marginalization that people of color deal with.
Jeremiah, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I do feel that all of that, I mean, all of those conversations about redlining and reparations, no, not everyone is talking about it, but not every activist group is the same. And I don't think that it's helpful to paint people with the broad brush as far as what activist groups are doing, because just like our movie watching, and just like our popular culture taste, we're incredibly fractured, and people all have their kind of pet issues. But believe me, economic ones are definitely part of young people's issues. No, they are. I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, no, but I would say things
I'm
like,
saying a part of the popular conversation. The mass conversation is never about things like reparations. That's considered a lark.
Well, I mean, you only need to read Ta-Nehisi Coates, who brought back the topic of reparations into popular consciousness. I talk about reparations in my U.S. history class, and I have students who are very open to it, and I have students, even students of color, who are very much against reparations because they don't want to. They don't want it to appear that they're getting a handout. I mean,
I don't want money for nothing.
It's all wrapped up in that conversation, even though, or in people's identity, even though they may not articulate it all the time.
Yes, but I think it's also a shame that we had to have the Tulsa race riots come out and watch me. That's what made it enter the popular consciousness.
Yeah,
no one knew what it was.
I agree with you.
And in Tulsa today because Regina King put it on her show. Otherwise, Obama went to Tulsa when I lived in Oklahoma in 2015 and never brought it up.
and it was celebrated this week. I mean, not celebrated,
Because
but
of her, because of Damon Lindelof. They have to
yeah,
get their credit for that.
I have to say, I speaking of this, I saw one of the most inspiring things I've seen in a long time last night. On Apple TV. Apple TV has a new documentary series called Home, and the second episode dealt with a man, a black man from the South Side of Chicago, and I forget his name because it's a very interesting name. I would mispronounce it. But he was an urban planner by trade and also an artist. And what he decided to do was, living in a South Side neighborhood, which has a lot of poverty and a lot of these buildings were destroyed, he decided to take his artistic and acumen and rebuild and restore buildings in his own neighborhood and turn them into something new. And what he was doing was incredible. And this whole episode, it was the second episode of this documentary series. The first episode dealt with I think a Swedish family that built a home within a greenhouse. And they had a greenhouse that surrounded their home. It was amazing. But this guy, he found like there was a dilapidated bank, a bank that had gone bust in like the 60s and had been sitting on the street corner. I mean, it was completely destroyed. And they were going to raise the building. And his art, and he's a very famous artist, he takes buildings and renovates them. And he decided, he's like, no, I'm gonna turn this building, this bank building that was going to be destroyed, into an art center. And the woman whose parents founded Ebony and Jet magazine donated their entire collection of black literary works, thousands of books. And he transformed this building and then his own house and everything. He created a movie theater space, like an art space with a movie theater. I mean, it was amazing. And I was watching what he was doing, and his whole philosophy was, he's like, man, I live here. This is my town. And what I want to do is, my activism is to actually do something and transform our town where we live, places I've walked by my entire life that are here. Who better than me to change our environment? And I was like, it was the most uplifting, the most American shit I'd seen in a long time, where somebody just said, you know what? I'm going to change my neighborhood for the better. Exactly. Because I can do it here. I'm not going to talk about some grandiose rainbow in the sky. I'm going to change the world. No. And it wasn't even think locally or think globally, act locally. It kind of was that, but what he was doing was so amazing. I recommend everyone watch this documentary series, Home. I've only seen the first 2 episodes, but that second episode was unbelievable. And in terms of activism and what can be done in a neighborhood, I mean, yes, he does have the artistic. He's a world-renowned artist, but he's also a professor of urban planning or something. And I was like, really? Yeah. And he applied it all. And watching this episode, wait till you see what he does. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I'm thinking, that's America, man. Where's that America? Where's the pull yourself up by your bootstraps? It's time to we're going to raise a barn like in the movie Witness in the Amish community. The whole community turns out we're gonna build a barn. Everyone shows up and you build a barn. I mean, I honestly believe, even in LA and Pasadena where I live, if I had a problem, my neighbors, if I went over to my neighbors, I'm like, hey man, can you help me out? I don't know their names. I've lived here for 4 years. I don't know my neighbors. We nod at them and like, okay. But I think if there was a problem or if I needed help, they would come. They would show up. And they would lend a hand. They would throw in and help you. I don't know if you want. I don't live in a place where I need a barn, but if that's what I was doing, there would be people in the neighborhood. Yeah, that right. I mean, in Victoria, they probably would help me out, right? The whole town would show up.
Well, some of the young activists I know, they're starting something called mutual fund assistance, where it's now much easier to do it now with the magic of the internet. But it goes back to old kind of community organizing roots, where you help each other out financially, you help each other out with things that you may want to barter and trade. And now it's just now that community whatever community you identify with. Now that net has been cast wider because the easy to transfer money and things through the internet. But yeah, mutual fund assistance is happening even with young activist groups now.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
Professor Esther, I think to your point and kind of get into what you were just saying, Rob, I think people do tend to paint each other with broad brushes because of what the media conditions us to believe about people with opposing ideas. I think there's a sense that other people are other, and we don't focus as much on our common humanity. And I think that creates that fractured sense of what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. You got to go figure it out for yourself. I don't understand you. And I mean, it's the central thesis of your program that science fiction helps kind of break down those barriers and help people to understand through allegory, through storytelling, that we have more in common than we actually have different.
100%. But I also have to say that, like, one day, I don't know, I was making a point. I was saying that I was talking about, like, how we can bring the world together. And I made the point that, like, what we need is we need everyone's mom to cook their great meal, and we get everyone's mothers together, and we all sit down at a table, and we'll all eat what our moms cook. I got pushback. I got people writing back to me going, "Are you saying that all mothers are just women that should be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen?" And
They took it the worst way possible.
but it was to me. I'm like, look, all of us. Well, hopefully, we had mothers. Our mothers will inevitably cook for us, and our mothers had dishes that we had favorite dishes. I mean, it's not like I'm not saying that a mother's job is to cook for their family, but mothers just do that. That's something that has been, and in a lot of families, cooking is an art form, and
Definitely.
that's something that mothers, fathers, they do together.
Unique to your culture.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, the point I was trying to make was that every mother has their signature dish, and I could have said every person, but I was thinking moms because, when you're a kid growing up, your mom, assuming you have a mom, cooks something that's your favorite, and she knows it's your favorite. When she cooks it, it's a big deal. Like, mom's made this. And I was like, what if you got all the moms together and they all cook their different meals? It doesn't matter what color you are, what shape you are, what size, creed, what your sexuality is, your religious beliefs. Everyone's going to sit down and eat mom's favorite meal.
But our
Eat mom's
popular
favorite
discourse
dish.
has become so polarized that people
Now,
can't even take your comment in good faith.
no, I mean,
That's the kind of culture we're in, where we want to pick apart what you said down to, oh, it was a mom, instead of the gist of the larger point you were trying to make is, where is our sense of community as people? That was your point,
yes.
not mother or father who cooked it or what the food was.
I was just trying to make it, a little bit more colloquial, sort of like how we can all understand. And by the way, this doesn't really happen outside of the United States. And I really have a problem. I mean, Esther, I hope that I really don't understand. I thought that our culture was on a nice path. 20 years ago, I have LGBTQ friends that can't believe, they would have told me, they told me now, they're like, 20 years ago, we can't believe same-sex marriage is in the offing. Can't believe it exists. Now it does. So I have a lot of LGBTQ friends that can't believe the progress that's made. I have other people that disagree, but we were on an evolutionary course that was a good one, where things were getting better, that voices were being heard, and people were getting more aware of things. And I just don't know how it got so derailed into these weird identity politics rows that everybody seems to be having everywhere. And I thought we were evolving. I thought it was happening naturally, but then all of a sudden it wasn't happening fast enough.
The memification of our culture.
Well, that's part of it. I
And
do think
then
that's part of it.
the dumbing down of our discourse. Everything is always extremely black and white, and we lose nuance in public discourse now. So that's a large part of it right there.
I mean, Esther, are you positive? Are you optimistic about our future?
No, but that's because I'm a historian.
Right.
You have to keep this in mind. When I teach the history of the modern world, I'm a medievalist, but because I'm the only one who is a specialist in non-U.S. history. I'm responsible for classes on world history, on Europe, and what have you. And I try to hone in on a theme for each semester. So the theme for world history from 1500 to roughly I never get to the present. I get to like 1970. My theme is that the history of the world can be best understood not only in terms of imperialism, because and colonialism, which is a huge kind of thing that happens in those centuries.
Of course, still happening.
But also the movement of where you have humans who have always been very tribal and still are.
Yep.
Versus the kind of Enlightenment ideas that at the very outset, if you read Rousseau, if you read any of the founding fathers, they're very they talk in very idealistic terms about mankind and about having freedoms and liberties and all of that. But really, they were thinking of a property owning class. But those ideals were always there, and throughout the course of the 19th and 20th century, it's always been expanding those ideals beyond the property owners, right? But that's always hit against the kind of inherent tribalism that is, I think, part of our human nature, and that I think has been one of the driving forces of the last 500 years. Is what happens, or 400 years, what happens when you get these beautiful kind of ideals about equality, about egalitarianism, which goes head to head with the tribalism that is inherent to us, and then the drive in those years to expand those ideas of egalitarianism to a broader population. And that's been kind of the main struggle of the modern world, and that's how I teach the modern world. So you can talk about, for example, nationalism, which existed in some form or another before the 19th century, but really became crystallized in the 19th century. And then you have the forces of nationalism versus the forces of socialism, which is nationalism is all about tribalism. It's about only people who are part of the nation are considered to be beneficiaries of this and that. Whereas socialism is like, no, let's kind of lift everyone up. It's all about the workers. And so you have these kind of competing ideologies that are kind of driving forward the story of our humanity. And I don't think it's very different right now, where you have groups of people who are wanting to be included in these kind of beautiful ideals of egalitarianism, fighting against, or actually not fighting, but rather coming up against the forces of tribalism. And then it's all kind of mixed into this soup of late stage capitalism, where you have a gig economy where things are not as good as they used to be, economically speaking, for this generation. So I think that it's very important to understand that it's not about individuals, and it's not even really about one group. It's about these various forces coming together and how humanity has interacted with one another and how we have built societies for the last 500, 400 years.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that. Darth Plato says, it used to be the case that groups had status because groups were comprised of individuals, and individuals have constitutional protection. Now, individuals have status because they belong to a group. A hierarchy of groups has been imposed. Is that progress?
I think there's always been a hierarchy of groups. When has there not been a hierarchy?
I would agree with that.
I mean, if you're talking about, I think a lot of, let's not mistake Twitter clout and like social media for real life, and like I know that a lot of political discourse happens there, but that's not like real life.
Not reality.
A lot of it's what you mentioned, Rob. It's a lot of like getting to know your neighbors and community organizing. That's how people experience real change, like on the ground. Definitely. I think that I'm a very cynical person. If we were to give our money to a Senate candidate or to a presidential, I don't think we're not billionaires. That's not going to count much in our society. But our local politicians, that does count.
Right.
Yeah. What we do locally. It's an enormous kind of problem that we cannot, you and I, just ordinary folks, we cannot really materially affect national politics, but we can on the local level. And
Definitely.
that's the kind of greatness about America, but it's also kind of the downside of it because a lot of important stuff happens on the national level as well.
Right.
So that's kind of where we are. And don't confuse Twitter discourse or social media discourse with like actual clout.
So, Professor, on a scale of 0 to Rome, how close is our capitalist system to imploding in this country? Where are we on the spectrum? I know you said you're cynical, but
I think we're so the crisis that we had in '08 with the housing crisis, it doesn't look like we're going to have that kind of housing crisis, but from what economists tell us is that there's an incoming crisis with student loans, just in the immediate future.
Can't even lose them in bankruptcy. I'm trying.
Yeah, there's a huge problem with that. There's always a problem with healthcare, obviously. What is worrying me, and this was actually a tag at the end of the movie Big Short, which I know you're a big fan of, Rob.
Huge fan.
My big worry is that everyone is shorting on water.
Yeah.
Everyone is doing investments or they're the big fight in the future I think is going to be water. It's environmental issues. Yeah. And that is a problem very particular to us. It's a problem of the Anthropocene. I don't know, I know, John Green just published a book called The Anthropocene Reviewed, but there's an argument that we shouldn't teach history, starting from the French Revolution, starting from the Enlightenment. We should start it with the Industrial Revolution and start talking about the Anthropocene, when humans begin to overwhelmingly and negatively affect their environment to the point of oblivion. That is the Anthropocene era, and we're in it right now. And Anthropocene era, that we don't think in terms of presidential terms. We don't think in terms of even movements. We think in terms of long-term change until we don't have any more water, apparently.
Well, look, no one works against their own best interests better than we do. I mean, which I find, I've always thought, we live in a closed system. It's not like water is coming to us from space. The water that exists on this planet is the exact same water that was here 1 billion years ago. It's just been moved around through systems, and I mean, and maybe there is an ice asteroid that occasionally makes it to Earth and falls into the ocean, but not enough to make any difference. And it's strange to me that like I've never understood over the last 100 years, like environmental protections. Well, we allow this much arsenic in the groundwater, and I've always thought to myself, how about no arsenic in the groundwater? There's an acceptable level of death? Well, because it's profitable or whatever, and to me, I'm like, when you have this acceptable level of whatever across, I don't know, 100 different industries or whatever. So basically, what you're doing is there's an accumulation of pollution and destruction we're allowed to deal with, and we expect what to happen. How is our closed system supposed to come back from this? Now, marine life can come back fairly quickly if we agree to not overfish or do all these things, which we're lucky about, but that's not going to last forever. And
also, the shipping lanes are very disruptive to marine life because of the noise. It's a huge problem.
And you wonder, like, okay, I get it. We all have to make we have to make ends meet and all of these things, but at the end of the day, we've never in human history, the last 100 years, the expansion of technology and what we're able to do on this planet has been beyond. I mean, we've been circling the planet for or the sun for 5 billion years, but it wasn't until really the last 100 years that we had the power to really fuck up the planet so quickly and on a maximum scale. And yet we'll do everything we can to not take responsibility. no, man.
Yeah.
Let's, just give me a little hundred, give me a couple $100. I'll make sure I'll smooth it over for you. You'll get past the environmental protection. It's fine. And it's strange to me that where do you think we're gonna go when the
So
water
what
runs
are
out?
those?
I think okay, this is I'm a huge pessimist, but listen, I think capitalism is going to win out. I think the only reason why we have the environmental protections we have, for the same reason that we have labor rights, is because of activism. You have actual people fighting for the environment. You have people fighting for workers' rights. Capitalists don't give that to you from the goodness of their hearts. They will pollute if it's cheaper for them, and they will not give you overtime. It's cheaper for them. The little benefits that we have gotten in life is through the very tireless work from activists.
Yeah.
And even yet, I do not think that's going to be enough, because
Yeah, I
I
was
think
gonna ask
that
that.
I think the destruction I think we're too far gone. And what that means is that it's really going to be poor people who are suffering. You think rich people are going to have any problems getting clean water? No. It's going to be the poor who suffer first, and then we'll all suffer. But that's in the future, and we're not thinking in
We live
in-
quarter to quarter, Rob. You talked about it with your tax evasion opening.
I agree, and it drives me crazy. Like, it's funny when you work on films, when you set out to make a movie, you're not thinking in terms of your next fiscal quarter. You're thinking 2 or 3 years, 4 years down the road. Or an independent movie or a documentary could be sometimes a decade or half a decade or a decade, because
We need something for that next earnings call.
yeah, and I understand that. I get that. I totally understand that. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to stop and one day realize, like, okay, I hope that what the COVID year taught us is that our economy, everything stopped, and we didn't die. The economy didn't collapse. Certain businesses went away. But at the end of the day, I would like to believe that maybe the last year taught us something. That maybe, I mean, I'm an eternal optimist because I've seen life get pretty awesome. The post-geek singularity. I was in a community of one when I was growing up with all the things that I loved, and now look where we are. I mean, my God, look what brings us together on a global scale. Marvel movies. Who would have thought Thanos' snap in reality, it didn't really eliminate half the universe, but what it did do was it made the entire world be a fan of Infinity War and Endgame, so we can all talk about it. You can't go anywhere on the planet and not talk about I do that all the time. I use pop culture to break the ice when I'm overseas, and it works.
Rob, that's why you've been it's John Schnepp, Campia, all the Perry Nemiroff, Mark Ellis, whom I've seen live, his comedy shows when he was in New York when I was a graduate student there. You guys have been such a big part of my life because I have found the news to be unbearable.
Wow.
Really just, and I'm a historian, so I teach really depressing stuff, right? But it's sometimes a little bit too much. And sometimes I just want to hear about something that is being developed at a studio, or, what's going to happen with the Snyder Cut, or just stuff that has a lot of meaning to me, because I find living in the modern world to be insufferable, because
Yes.
I know where we are going, and I don't think we're going anywhere good. And I wish I had your optimism. I don't. I have avoidance.
Now, see,
And
but how do we
I-
transfer
and-
that?
And my way of avoidance has been listening, to you and John just chat about stuff, and you guys having real industry insight. It completely just distracts me from what is going on. It's not that I don't pay attention. It's just, it's painful.
Well,
Enjoy some
Jeremiah, what
honest
were you
pop
gonna
culture
ask? You were gonna ask something just now.
I was going to throw it out to you all. And of course, there's nothing wrong with harmless pop culture effluvia. It is that analgesic that kind of helps us get over, like you said, the trauma of reality. But I was going to throw it to you guys. What will it take to make those ideals jump off the page and jump off the screen? We have Captain America up on the screen fighting against Thanos and this just faceless horde, insurmountable odds. Doctor Strange said, "What, 1 in 14 million chances that it's going to work?" So when how do we take those ideals that we all enjoy, that we've all seen, that are now ubiquitous, and transfer them into the real world and allow people to see, hey, there are existential crises now. We have an infinite crisis going on now when it comes to water, when it comes to trash, when it comes to the environment. How do we inspire people to take up the mantle of these characters that are on the page or on the screen and apply those same ethical convictions to daily life?
Let me go back
Or
11
can
years.
we?
Let me go back to 11 years to Avatar. This was it's still the biggest movie in the world, and this is an unabashed pro-environment movie, and it was popular for a few years. And I think when the Cameron sequels come out, it'll continue to be popular.
I do too.
I disagree that it's out of the pop culture.
Yeah, never bet against James Cameron.
I
Never,
don't. He's
never.
he's one of my favorite filmmakers, up there with Tarantino and Kubrick and stuff. So I
Very
never
underrated.
bet against Cameron. But if anything, that movie would have maybe sparked something. And it's not that I'm saying that pop culture can't change minds, or it can't reorient us towards a different way of thinking. I mean, I just think of the documentary Blackfish, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
basically bankrupted SeaWorld. So I'm not saying that pop culture doesn't have any power. I mean, for God's sakes, I write about pop culture all the time. I put a big amount of importance on music and the things that we watch. But I think change is systemic. Change has to start at a systemic level, and I'm not necessarily sure that pop culture can do that. You, Rob, what do you think?
Well, look, I mean, I think that pop culture can plant the seeds of change, and I think you're right. I mean, you're never going to get entertainment necessarily to get people to suddenly change their lives. However, it like Inception, it can plant the
Exactly.
idea in people's minds, and it will give people a direction from which to go. I mean, look, I think everybody is looking for somebody to tell them something about the world at large. I mean, we've lost all of that. All of our institutions have been destroyed because of scandal or whatever, when we realize that there's nobody who's beyond human nature. I wish there were. I wish everybody came from Krypton and we were all schooled by Jor-El to be great people, but we're not. And so I think there is, as you're pointing out, there's a deep cynicism in everyone about the world around us. But the fact is, that's more conceptual than real. When you walk out your front door and you actually start interacting with people, I think that, in my experience, things get a little better, not worse, because when you find like-minded individuals and you actually start doing something, and you put things together, whether you're going to start a community theater, whether you're going to start some kind of build a garden, whatever your activism is going to lead you to do, it's amazing that you find like-minded people that want to make things and do things that are better. And I think that the problem, what I don't understand is, coming from Hollywood, working on an independent film, if there's a problem on a movie, you solve it. Your production manager and the people on the film are like, okay, here's the problem. What do we need to solve it? And they go out and solve it, because time is money. And what I don't get is, why isn't our government the same way? Like, okay, here's this problem.
They're paid
We all
to be
know what the
inefficient.
we all know what the problem is. Let's fix the problem. And the problem, as I see it, is that these problems now are kicked down the. Everyone's like, well, if I were to cooperate with you, what about my constituency? They're not going to vote for me in 2 years. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the problem we have to solve right now. That's a 2 year from now problem. And I would say that if you fix this problem with me, we can then tell the world, and perhaps that will help you. I see that America has become, especially at our political, our governmental level, federally, we have become a country that is no longer solving problems. All we're doing is disagreeing because of the divisiveness of the Republican and Democratic parties. There's all this infighting. There's all this ridiculousness. And in the meantime, the country out here needs problem solved, that you could solve these problems right now. But because of partisan politics or whatever, we're not going to do that. And I don't understand why that's the case. On a movie set where time is money, where every second is quantifiable with a dollar figure, you got to solve those damn problems. Because if 2 minutes go by, if 10 minutes go by, you've blown $10,000. And why don't we fix these problems? And
But
that's
Citizens United, Professor Esther, I'm sure you could tell us that Citizens United told us that now the chief political constituent is the dollar. So that's who they're looking out for.
I think, Rob, what you're describing is people getting together to solve problems is something is a product of a functioning democracy.
right.
We have a massive structural problem, is that there's too much money in politics. As I mentioned, we have a community problem. We're gonna probably fix it because we're doing it at a community level, at a local level. The problem with national government is that we have a very old political system that needs to be updated. It was great when it was, actually it wasn't even that great in the 18th century, but whatever. It worked for the people who were coming up with that government in the 18th century. Now we are a vastly different and bigger nation. And we do not have, with Citizens United, with the amount of money that is in politics, that is in national politics, we are not going to have a functioning democracy because, my two senators, John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, they do not care. They do not care about me as a constituent.
Right.
They
Yeah,
don't
Rob,
even.
our
They,
power
they
went out.
don't even really
Ted
care
went to
about
Mexico.
my neighbors who voted for them. They care about Whataburger. They care about the donors from the oil interests. That is who their constituents are. And so I understand what you're saying, and I think that this problem solving would be a lot better if we got money out of politics. But that would require a Supreme Court ruling with our conservative court. I don't.
Oh yeah,
happening.
no, I 100% agree with you. By the way, Ash Chauhan says, because social media has allowed dividing lines to widen, misinformation to become wildfire, and the I'm right, you're wrong mentality to rule, we have lost any and all common ground to advance as a nation. Pessimism is the reality we refuse to acknowledge. And then Sonny Dominguez says, speaking of rock bands, Rival Sons, anyone? I don't know Rival Sons, but I will
don't know
listen
that
to them.
either. Sorry.
But what Ash is saying, like, look, to me, it's we actually live in a world where our government is so divided that the problem that exists, they won't just step in. It's within their power to go solve that problem relatively quickly, but they won't do it. Like one of the things in California, the homeless problem. We have an enormous homeless problem in this state. And yet, because there's no way to make helping the homeless profitable.
It's one big shanty town.
Yeah, it's there's no money. There's no money in making the homeless
Fixing problems.
There's no money in it. None.
There's no money to be made fixing problems.
And yet
yeah.
the undermining of our civilization, of our social tapestry with our homeless problem is enormous. I watched a video today. A woman has a beautiful house in Venice. She was bitching she couldn't have her grandparent or her grandkids come in because it's so dangerous with all the homeless people outside. And the thing is, on one hand, people want to say, well, we don't want to judge those people. But the predominant amount of homeless in this country are mentally ill and addicts. And so they need help. They need help. And it's not like we're like, well, we have to figure out a way to house them. Housing isn't the problem.
No,
the problem is these are people that have a fundamental lack of functionality in our civilization. What we need is to help them. We need good people to help them. And yet that costs money. There is no profitability in helping our homeless. So we just allowed the problem to get bigger without solving it. And then it becomes a much bigger and bigger problem to the point where, oh my God, it's so big now we can't. It's too expensive to fix. So they let it go on.
That goes for a lot of problems, just not just.
I know all. I mean, every
American
problem.
It's. I
Every
mean,
problem in this country.
If you've noticed, a lot of the major social programs that we benefit from today would never have a chance of passing Congress.
Not a snowball's chance.
Kind of reality in today's the ones that we enjoy today were kind of were products of an earlier time in the 20th century. Like I think of like something very simple like the national parks. That's not something to privatize. That there's no money in preservation, but it is so crucial to our national character to have these beautiful national parks, to have, I go to occasionally the last really big thing that I did prior to COVID was to go to the National Arches Monument. It looks like a Mars land. It's so beautiful. 300 million year old arches, in Utah. And you can't make money off of preservation.
There's no way to quantify, yeah.
Have all these beautiful parks is because we've had programs from the 20th century on
Roosevelt,
that are preserving these places. So yes, these are things. There is a government role for these things, and it's about convincing. Normally, it would be about convincing taxpayers that it's worth investing in, but we're no longer really the constituents for it. It's big oil, it's big money, and there's no money in that. Think of something like the space program, Rob. This is a very expensive program to get the astronauts on the moon. And the US government did what they could in order to get people on board with the space program. The astronauts had.
We're losing you a bit.
Very photogenic.
It's
there we
go.
And why would NASA go through? You see me?
Yeah. It's just stuttering a bit. But the space program too. We threw all that money into it to beat the Russians.
Yeah.
It was completely political, as much as we wanted to let.
It was a national, absolutely.
Yeah. And it wasn't for the scientists.
But it had all these it had these scientific. No, it wasn't, but it had ancillary benefits.
Oh yeah,
for scientists. But you had to convince the taxpayer that this was worthy of doing. Now something like putting anyone on the moon would be impossible.
Well, it would be governmentally, and I think that we're going to see whether it's Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic or SpaceX, they will.
Blue Origin's never got anything into space, Rob. They're lagging.
I know they are lagging.
But they still got that $10 billion contract, which speaks to Professor Esther's point. Even though they haven't given us any working prototypes, the government still went out of the way to give Amazon a contract.
I know. But I mean, what SpaceX has done, though, has been amazing. Reusable rockets, going to servicing the International Space Station, circumventing the years of bureaucracy that our own space program, NASA, takes. I mean, it's amazing. Hey, listen, you two beautiful people, I have to go to bed. And this has been my favorite midnighter that we've had so far. The two of you. Esther.
I think we lost Esther.
Esther's frozen.
Yeah,
I think
we lost her.
First of all, Jeremiah, you can hear me. I'm sure Esther can hear me as well.
Hop back in? Or
Yeah, she could come back in if she could. But I'm going to end our amazing chat. This was amazing. I feel it was so worthwhile. Jeremiah,
go as long as you did.
I can't thank you enough. And Esther, what a delight you are. Please, I would love to talk to you offline. Send me an email, send me a letter or something via the Burnettwork.net website so I can get back in touch with you. That would be great. And this was a lot of fun. And Jeremiah, I can't thank you for being here enough. It's really great to talk with.
Thank you for having me.
I felt like we had some elevated college conversation here, not just because of Esther, but with you too. I mean, it's obviously you're a very learned man. It's always a joy to talk with you. I think I think you and I will have in the future. We'll do a show. We'll probably have a weekly show or something. I think we should do that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I think it'd be really beneficial. But on that note, it'll be fun. We'll talk further about that because I have your email. So let's talk about that and do that. And I will say I would bid you good evening because I'm going to go to bed because I got to go to bed because John Campy is expecting me to get up and do that show. But thank you for being here.
Thanks again.
And I will say a very fond farewell to you, Jeremiah. Thanks for being on the 9th episode of Midnighter. It's great to have you.
Appreciate you having me.
All right, man. I will talk with you later, sir. Wow. What can I say? While I know, I hope a lot of you weren't disappointed that I wasn't opening it up for more people. I thought that Esther and Jeremiah and I had a conversation very much worth having. I found it very stimulating, and I know some of you are going to just be like, oh, you and Esther were bonding on the English Patient tip. Well, perhaps that's true, because the English Patient rules. And, yeah, I admire Ralph Fiennes, even though he was a sellout and not the greatest guy in the world. But I still love the movie. I haven't met many people that love it as much as I do. And it's great to have Jeremiah from Houston again, a very learned man, an imagination connoisseur par excellence. So I want to thank you all for joining me here on the Midnighter. Join me tomorrow on the John Campy Show. Then I will be back on Fully Articulated with Az and maybe Justin. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but it'll, be about action figures. I am not doing a Robservations tomorrow. I am doing a Robservations Midnighter tomorrow. So join me for that. And then the 700th show is on Thursday, where we're going to finally finish this. Well, I'm going to announce the semifinalists, and then we're going to do a Whining About Movies to end the film festival that's 6 months overdue. But I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank, Dean Mikitich is here. Darren Seeley is here. I know that Bunyan Snipe was here. I want to thank you for doing this late night. I know you're around, so it's not so late night for all of you, but thank you so very much. I want to thank everyone who supports the channel via tips and super chats. Thank you. Very much appreciated. And you can always write me letters at the Burnettwork.net website. And on that note, I would like to say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bring an end to the 9th episode of the Robservations Midnighter. For me, as we say in the industry, this show is kind of on the bubble. Like, doing a show at midnight, it's rough, man. It's rough. But tonight, I'm like, I don't want to pull the plug on the show prematurely, because meeting Esther and talking to Jeremiah, I found this very worth my while. And if nothing else, if we can do a show like this, maybe it's not going to be the most popular thing, but on the other hand, I think it's very worthwhile. So I want to thank both of my esteemed guests. It was great to have you, and thank you very much. And on that note, I would say to everyone, have a better night.